Okay. So, how's it going?
Good. How you doing, Cameron?
I'm doing pretty good. Are you in Florida?
I am back down in
Nice.
Florida. Got a 3-year hiatus in California, but back down here now.
Yeah. Are you happy to be back, or is it something? Is it like a little bittersweet?
I think we had a good time in California. I think with a family of 7 in the heart of Silicon Valley, I think there's a time limit on that. How long you can be
Yeah.
out
Just
there? And, 3
some
years.
cost considerations. Yeah. Yeah.
That's a small part of it, maybe a
Yeah.
huge part of it.
Did you go back to the same town? I think it was like, were you in Saratoga Springs, or did I make that up?
Yeah, so we're in Sarasota, about an hour south,
Sarasota.
about halfway down the state. We moved out to just outside of Menlo Park, ground zero for Facebook and Instagram. And we were in here in Sarasota before we left. We ended up selling the home that we were in, and then came back and I bought a home while we were in California. That's literally across the street from where we lived, and it's been great. It's been great to be back down here.
That's cool. So, are you doing any judging of the people who now own your old home and like yard maintenance and like whether they're doing a good job?
Exactly. Curse you, people, for owning our home.
Yeah.
We loved that home too. It was
Oh,
hard to give that up. There's so many things that go into play when you think of like a major move across the country, when you have 5 kids and you got kids that are in high school and making that move like during the school year, right? I mean, it's just, oh my gosh, the
um,
number of things that you go through in trying to make that decision. I sold Authentic Jobs around the same time that I took the role at Facebook. I mean, we like to say that there wasn't anything left unchanged in our lives by that move. We had to give up our dog to a friend. They basically adopted our dog because we
oh, oh my goodness.
were out
Oh, wow.
to have a dog and the affordability of places out there. And we knew that was going to be challenging. This car that I'd driven forever, this 1988 Jeep Cherokee, 285,000 miles on it, right? We had this thing for 17 years, bought it used from someone else. And just 2 weeks before we were scheduled to move, one of my sons rear-ended another car at 40 miles an hour and just totaled the car. And it's like, we can't even move to California with that. We lose our dog, we lose the car, we sold our home, we
Complete.
sold the business. And it was just like this complete reset of the Moll family.
Wow. Um, my first question is my most delicate one, maybe, is do you try to get your dog back, or do you just say like you have to let go of the dog
Uh,
permanently?
she's with a family that are very good friends of ours, and we get to go over there anytime we want. And they've done a great job of taking care of her. So I think she's very happy that she's happy.
That's cool. That's a nice property of dogs. They get to, they generally are pretty happy
Yeah.
wherever they go and where they're loved. Um, and then my other question for you is, what came first, the selling and shutting down of Authentic Jobs, or the going to Facebook, or did you like work out a bundle deal? I was always curious
Right,
about that.
right. No, Facebook did not buy Authentic Jobs. Let's be clear
No.
about that. They were both kind of in flight. Here's the weird thing about I'm not even sure how I'd describe this, Cameron, to be quite honest. I'd run Authentic Jobs full time for 7 years,
Yeah.
and it had operated for 4 years on the side before that. It was never intended to be a full time business, and then one of those accidental CEO things, and it grew into this small but successful business. And about 7 years into it, I really enjoyed running the company, but at some point you start to ask the question, am I doing enough? Or at least I did. Am I doing enough to grow this business? Is it challenging me enough? And I started asking those questions, and I think one thing led to another, which opened the door for moving on to a Facebook, and as part of that, thinking about selling the business. That was almost 4 years ago now. Actually, I think it was more than 4 years ago. And you will always have, for the rest of your life, opportunities to question the decisions that you make, especially those major ones. And I've done my fair share of that, right? Going back and replaying in my mind, was it the right thing to sell the business? Couldn't I have passed that on to one of my sons? And yada yada yada. You just run through all those things to no avail. But all things considered, it provided, I think, a lot of great learning opportunities, most of which we were not expecting when we moved out to California.
Mm,
things that we experienced out there. But nonetheless, it just gave us some great opportunities to learn stuff that we were not ready to learn, but nonetheless needed to. And so I think it all worked out okay in the end.
That's cool. The uh, well, one question I have about like whether authentic jobs is challenging or not is like with job postings outside of like marketing and different ways you could promote yourself. Were there like were you feeling limited by the number of like levers you'd have in the product of like what you could do? This doesn't seem like you can necessarily do that much.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things we were looking at before I ended up selling the business was the uptick in just posting, jobs on Twitter, for example, and asking people to DM you. Right? We were trying to explore how do we tap into that. There's been some creativity that's taken place in the job space since then, but we knew that was, an up and coming thing. We also knew that job boards on their own could no longer just exist as solely a post and pray operation, right? Where you just have a list of jobs and you hope that people will find, matches from that. We knew that in order to take authentic jobs to the next level, we'd have to become what they call an ATS, an applicant tracking system, right? Where we have the rest of the funnel built in, where once you acquire someone through, say, a job board, what's everything that follows after that, acquisition to hire. And so we knew that would probably need to be part of, the eventual evolution, pivot, whatever you want to call it, of authentic jobs, to go from just solely a listing of jobs to a much more robust offering.
That's cool. At Facebook, so I think of Facebook, I have some negative feelings about Facebook that are different from other people's negative feelings about Facebook. But one of the things that I think is difficult about that company is no matter sort of how well-meaning the core product and what they need business-wise is sort of, I think, in competition with your life as an individual and what it would mean to live like a super fulfilling life. But there is an exception, which is what you went and worked on, which is events, because events inherently are designed to get you back out into real life, like building the kind of memories that you would want. Did you like get lucky with that, or did you know that was what you were going to be doing? And then like you did it for like 3 years. So I got some follow-on questions about like what it's like to work, what you might learn about events like holistically or things like that.
I guess the short answer is no. I was not expecting going into Facebook that I'd be working on the events team. We were still discussing the places that we might position me at Facebook. And it ended up being events, and super fortunate that it did end up being that. I'll give you some context here. My very first day at Facebook was the Monday after the 2016 presidential election finalized.
Wow.
So I show up to Facebook, right? And I'm ready to go. It's like, what happened here? Right. And internally, the environment, you can imagine at the time what that must have been like at Facebook. And so I knew nothing other than this completely chaotic period of being at Facebook for 3 years and everything that followed after that, fake news and Cambridge Analytica and all the headlines that we've all read since then. But it was really weird in a good way to be on the events team, because we had that mission of connecting people in real life. And so as much as all this other stuff was happening around us at Facebook, the entire Facebook family for that matter, we knew that we had a mission of using Facebook effectively to get people off of Facebook and into, the real world with each other. And so we always kind of prided ourselves in that. Now I left before COVID hit. COVID has obviously forced Facebook and many other event platforms to think differently about gaps, obviously. And so now they have, I would say they have a revised mission as far as that's concerned. But we did certainly pride ourselves in the thick of all these crazy headlines that were happening.
Is there anything that you learned from like having like whatever 700 million or 1 billion people like interact with your product that like made you go like, like that would surprise you about how people like do events or run events or interact with events?
Yeah, two things. One, I've been asked this question before. What is it like to build for 700 million people? And it's actually not a lot different from building for 700,000 people. You just have, your mistakes are much larger, right? The magnitude of your mistakes are much larger at that scale. But our processes were not very different from most product teams in the industry, and the way that we would build and ship product wasn't radically different. It's just, you recognize that you're trying to solve problems you iterate on defining and trying to, come up with solutions for those problems. But at the end of the day, it's not anything terribly different from what everyone else does, right? I'm at Pendo now, right? Great company, very small in terms of, Facebook size, but, we operate roughly the same way we did at Facebook. And so it's not anything different. So that's probably one learning, the fact that building for 700 million is not radically different from, 700K. The other thing,
they say that like to give if you're giving a speech, you got all these people,
yeah,
just look at one person. So you pick one random person and look at like Maria, and you're like, we're going to do this for Maria. So that's cool.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe the other thing is, I don't know if this is specific to events, but, a lot of these large tech companies, in some respects, know users better than we know ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
They know what gets you to come back, what keeps you engaged on the platform. And I think because of that, they have an edge over perhaps, companies and maybe even event platforms for that matter, that don't have as much knowledge about you, or perhaps the algorithms in place that would re-engage you to come back. We knew that for event creators, it was important that they got engagement early in the process of posting an event, especially if you're a new creator on Facebook, right? How do we retain creators on Facebook? And so obviously we would try to generate ways that, your friends would have visibility of those events in their timelines, to be able to increase the engagement on that event in the first X number of days, such that you are more likely to retain as a creator. And so I think for both good and bad, companies like Facebook are able to use what they know about you to help you engage more with their platform.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that my slightly cynical point of view is that they know what's likely to get us to like act. And so they know like what our like trigger, like our buttons are, which is not like who we are, but it is what we respond to, like the stimuluses that we respond to. So they can sort of marionette us a little bit in a way that like it's hard, even when you know exactly. I heard once that the 99-cent trick, like we charge $9.99. It's like everyone, even if you know that that's a gimmick and you know that that's used to get you to do it, it still works on you. It's like so powerful, you can't beat it. And there are things sort of like that. I think that I would pick Twitter just the same or anything like that. But some of the bigger ones where the time on site matters so much. I just wonder about that. I have like go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say one more thing to that point. I've got teenage sons who on Instagram and all these other great products. But I'll often tell them, look, guys, those companies know a lot more about you than you do. Not all of your data and stuff like that, but they know how to bring you back, right? They know how to get you back onto their platform. They're very smart about how YouTube and Instagram and TikTok and so forth can get you to maximize the time you spend on those platforms, because obviously that drives revenue and a bunch of other things for them. And so we would use that at least as a way to make them cognizant of the fact that, look, if you're not at least on your guard, you're probably going to get pulled back into those platforms, because that's how they make money. That's how they stay in business.
Yeah. I went to a business school, and at business school, I feel like I got a training, like shark training, where you're like, you're just like around a lot of like very advanced social animals, and many of whom, not all of them, and even some of the like narcissistic sociotypes are kind of lovable in their own way. They can be, but I do think that one of the things I like think I learned, I don't know for sure, is that like a sociopath is really good at observing you and doing a preset set of things to get you to do what they want, but have it be you that did it. Like, it's like they get you, it's because they can almost see just far enough ahead of where you're going to go that they can kind of tee that up. And I feel like the parallel between, like, basically, I feel like we have these sociopath entities that aren't even the people that are made up of them. It's just this other super being that is really good at fucking with us. but they also do really nice things. Like I also get some really lovely birthday messages and things like that I love. So, um, but
Look,
but I'm curious. Okay, go ahead.
you don't have to pull any punches with me, right?
I know, I love it. You don't work there anymore too, which is also great.
I get it. I see both the good and bad of all these platforms, and the reality is, like to your point, we're all subject to it. You know, I'll tell you, I had a team member at Facebook who once told me, look, I don't keep my phone by my bed anymore because I have a hard time putting it down at night.
Yeah.
Hard time not getting sucked into timelines and just scrolling. So when you have the very people working on these products saying, yeah, I need to put my phone away from my bed, it probably signals that, okay, we need to make sure we're thinking about this collectively the right
Yeah.
way.
And I actually I don't personally think of it as like evil. I think of it as just a consequence of a system that has been set up to like maximize our understanding of this specific type of exploration. And we've really learned where it goes, and it can keep going and we can keep sort of expanding out that way. But I would love just some other explorations, just charting different ways um, to consider how we exist. Like the cool thing is the web is the underlying thing that connected us all together. So like amazingly, all humans who can get access to the internet are connected together, which could be like the most beautiful thing ever. And like I think that, you know, you've been doing this for a long time, and you're like, you know, like super old guard, which is amazing. And you can go back to, you know, I watched a talk of yours recently where you talked about learning about CSS. That's earlier than my game. I already knew about CSS was like a thing, but you were around long enough to be like, oh, maybe I'll be skeptical of the CSS thing, or it could be good. But like if you go back then, like the attitudes and energies were so different, and really positive and like lightly utopian, and sort of we're not there. But I don't think it's like an evil thing. But I think it's an unhealthy thing that's worth like alternating. Um, but you know, whatever. Also, I live by a military base. So, speaking of large systems, there will be helicopters and jets periodically going by. The What I'm curious about, because Facebook did not always have, I was always skeptical of any large social network, and I think my feelings about Facebook predate like Cambridge Analytica and Donald Trump and all these things. It's just much more about, it's like a lower level thing. But I'm curious to know what it's like to join a company that I don't think had that bad of a reputation. And I don't think you've ever had a bad reputation. So like to go and then join and be like, oh, weird, there's like a complicated narrative around this place that I just joined. Like, how do you even think about that when you're so close to the inception of that like switch?
Yeah, it's such a great question. We did see a change in, like when I first started at Facebook, you know, that first Thanksgiving, which was right around the corner, and Christmas, and even the next one after that, for the most part, I could name drop Facebook, and it
Yeah.
was typically a good thing, right? For the
Yeah.
most part,
Yeah.
a lot of positive energy around that. By the second and third Thanksgiving, it's like, don't even mention it.
Yeah.
Facebook, I think,
Yeah. Yeah.
but you want to just get torn apart. And
Yeah.
so it did. I mean, the reality is, it became that way for a lot of people, where they were still proud to work at Facebook, but they couldn't really express that, you know, that pride in public settings as much as they once could, because of all the knee-jerk reactions that would incite if you did that.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, which is super interesting because I know a ton of extremely nice, thoughtful, smart people who work there too. And so I can, you know, it's weird to have people like have an opinion about your company like that, especially when it's really nuanced, and then especially when it gets political, which is now is everything's quite political. But like, you know, I've been around like very heavy left people who hate Facebook, very heavy right people who hate Facebook, basically for the exact same reasons, which is another kind of interesting nuance. Like I think that they, well, that's a whole other thing. Let's not do politics. I'm going to switch us to important personal questions. One, you look so buttoned up. Are you cutting your own hair? Who in your family cuts hair? Do you have a really good barber? Look at this. I'm like an animal right now. I don't know. How are you doing it?
Have long hair like that. I just
Yeah.
don't get it for it. We actually started, I'm sure, like a lot of other people, started cutting our own hair.
Yeah.
So my
I,
wife cuts my hair now.
I'll tell her 10 out of 10. It's looking great. I'll do my beard, which I have not done recently, but I'm very nervous about hair. I should just get comfortable. I should just buzz it. It won't, it won't really matter.
Well, it helps that we've been cutting 5 boys' hair for a long time. We've
Oh
always
yeah.
at home, so we've kind of got the tools and I think the wherewithal to make it happen.
So you have 5 boys, no daughters?
Yeah, no daughters.
No daughters. It's wild. I grew up next to my cousins. They have 7 kids now, but they had 5 boys in a row. And my aunt, she's one of 6 sisters, so she's like wanted a daughter so badly and gave up. And they got a dog, and they named the dog Katie because she'd always wanted a daughter named Katie. Then the very next like month or two, she got pregnant with a daughter and named her Katie. So there was a period there where like if somebody would be like, oh my God, like Katie's outside of the house. It's like Katie the dog or Katie the baby? Like what level of urgency is this? So maybe if you break your rule of 7s and you have a 6th, that'll be the one. And then she had one more that was a son again. So that's just maybe that's your path. And then my second camera, because I don't hang out with too many people named Cameron or not really any other people named Cameron. I noticed that people like sometimes I thought it was like a somewhat easy name to convey. Like when you tell people your name over the phone, and they go, what? Like, how do you clarify Cameron? Do you spell it out every time, or do you use any other mnemonic to get it across?
So funny you bring this up. I've never had anyone ask me this question, and of course it would come from you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's either Carmen or Kevin is usually
Kevin. Oh yeah. Like
Cam. The syllables, right? Cam or run.
Yeah.
Cam, run and try to. You would think it's a relatively common name nowadays.
Yeah.
That is not the case. You know this. What do you get called?
I get Kevin or I get Carmen. I get Kevin a ton. I get a lot of like, what? And then I just go, so this has been working for me. So this is why I'm sharing an inside Cameron tip is I just say like Cameron Diaz. And that works like a charm. Yeah. And so people know her. She's quite famous. And I don't think I sound like her, although I did once at Prime Meats in Brooklyn. I showed up after saying that to like convey my name over a restaurant, and they had thought Cameron Diaz was coming, and they were deeply saddened when it was me and my friends. So, they missed the like Cameron Diaz. So I got some questions for you based on some intel I did. Okay, just kept getting caught up because I haven't seen you in a really long time. Even before COVID, it had been a while. I saw that you are starting school again in 2021 at USC, or did I make that up? That's what the LinkedIn is telling me. Is you're starting some school thing.
I'm on pause right now.
Okay.
It's a little crazy. But I've always wanted to do a master's degree, and a couple of years ago, USC put out a new degree that's kind of a hybrid tech / MBA. I thought it might be interesting to get my feet wet with that, and dove in. And it's been great. I've been on pause for about close to a year now with all the changes that we made this past year. But no, I don't know. I'm fascinated by, I think, just the idea more than anything. At this stage in my career, it's like, what is that actually going to do for me at this point? Right? I think it's just one of those things where over the course of my career, I've been kind of chipping away at things that I find to be fascinating. And I'm like, why not check off that box, right?
Yeah.
And this is another box for me to check off. And who knows what it will actually lead to? Probably nothing. But for me, it's another feat to be accomplished.
Yeah. I think it will like demystify it a little bit for you too, because I meet a lot of people for whom like business and MBA is like, because it gets used, I think, like as like a influence thing, like a clout thing. People throw it around in a corporate setting as a way to like a similar to the way like an engineer might use overly technical language to box out, feedback or conversation. Like I think when you get in there, it'll be less than you would have expected doing more of that. But then also there are really good, I mean, for my time, I thought there was a lot of like positive takeaways, but it will like demystify the whole thing and then empower people that like, next time somebody throws like we got to go, blue ocean, 40,000 feet kind of crap or whatever. Like you're just like, no, don't give me any of that. Don't give me any of that right now. Well, that's cool.
Here's something that's crazy with this. So because it's like a hybrid MBA / technology design, one of the courses is on typography.
Nice.
I have not taken that course yet, but I have guest lectured for the class.
That's badass. Yeah, yeah,
And eventually I'm gonna
yeah,
have to actually take the class as a requisite for the degree, which is bizarre.
yeah. But that'll be cool. You should be like, does anybody want to figure out how to take all these letters and turn them into the Brooklyn Bridge? I feel like no big deal. I can handle that. You're working on one right now. Which one are you working on?
And the Golden Gate Bridge.
Oh, nice. Yeah, a little nod to your California time. Um, are there any good bridges in Sarasota?
Not really.
No. I've got a couple more questions, and then we're going to try this thing that, like, literally, I have no idea if anybody is watching us or if it's just you and I talking. Which
I think it's just you and I. I think it's like
it's a-okay by me. It's a-okay by me. But it's on a YouTube live somewhere, so people could be watching. And Mary has the other Zoom thing where people could have questions. And I'm hoping, this is her first time trying to spot, bad actors, we'll call them. So we'll see how it all goes. But I think when we let people in, we won't, unless we really know them. We just don't even do video. We'll just have people be audio. And then we'll see if they have any questions. And if they ask like a jerky question, we'll just go beep. And then if they ask a clever one, we'll go like, oh wow, clever question, that kind of thing. And then we can see if they anything to answer. I wanted to learn. I tried to understand what Pendo does, and could not fully, but it does do a lot. There are a lot of products, so I thought maybe you could, like, since that's where you work now, you could give like a succinct summary, like plug Pendo a little bit, and then a couple other little things.
Yeah, the keyword that I like to use is self-service, and that's especially applicable to my role in the VP of Design and Research. And so the ability to which you can kind of self-serve what we offer is pretty critical. In a nutshell, we offer analytics and the ability to do in-app communication with your customers. And so imagine self-serve analytics akin to Google Analytics, if it helps with kind of the frame of reference, but much more powerful than that. And we allow you to construct dashboards and segments of your customers in a very, no-code kind of point-and-click way. On the other end of the spectrum is a strong companion to that, and that is the ability to be able to communicate with your customers through your product. And the way that typically happens for most shops is to go to engineering and say, hey, we need to launch this, tooltip modal as part of onboarding, or the survey, or that sort of thing. And you typically have to engage your engineering team to do that. Well, we make it very easy to point and click so that you as a PM, as a director of design, or anybody, technical support, can be able to deploy that type of, guide or modal in your product experience. And then tie back the analytics portion of that to understand how to improve engagement. So we're helping, our mission is to help you guys improve adoption, retention, onboarding, in a way that allows effectively anyone in the company to point and click their way to those outcomes.
And so I could sort of put in one of these like opportunities for conversation around like a specific like feature that they're trying to use. Like I could sort of like line up when it would come in. Can you do it so that you could say, if somebody's like paused for a while on a thing, it's like, hey, you've been like stuck here for 10 seconds and then they're not doing anything, and you'd be like, hey, what's up?
Yep.
That's cool.
We've all seen these, right? We've seen these kinds of things pop up as we go throughout the tools that we use. And I think it requires, an understanding of the timing, of the necessity of those kinds of interactions inside of your product. And we allow you to get the analytics you need to understand if those things are performing well, and what you need to then take back to engineering, right? It's not just about putting a whole bunch of modals in that experience.
Ideally not,
you need that to then go improve the product where you are engaging engineering to do the heavier lifting.
Yeah, the timing is everything for that stuff, because when it's like right when I'm still trying to figure it out, I find it like a real turnoff. Yeah. I can't remember what her name was. She's some woman from, she's not at Google, but she spoke at Google, and she gave a talk on like the 4 types of customers, and like different people have different things. Different people, like somebody else wants help like right away and they don't have that same thing. So of course, just one more in the endless number of complexities of trying to make a simple product. That's cool. Dave DeSandro works with us, and he told me he saw something of yours and he couldn't remember it exactly, but he conveyed to me some story that you shared about reordering either your father or your father-in-law's icons manually. Does that ring a bell for you? Is that a thing that you remember, or does he incorrectly remember?
That was a story that I tell, early in my speaking career. It was actually my uncle, who was not tech savvy at all, one of those nice, you remember the original iMacs, right? They're just like all encompassed and they came in 5 colors and that sort of thing. And
yeah,
never had using probably through a mail catalog at that point, and just was self-taught. And thankfully, the OS at the time was, I don't know, relatively, it wasn't OS 10, but it was OS 8 or 9 or whatever it was. It was still kind of relatively easy to use. And the metaphor, all of these icons are arranged on your desktop. Well, what he did was treat his desktop as actual physical space. And so he would put all of these files as, imagine like note cards or pictures, right? That you would on a physical table, you'd put into nice stacks. And so he had this stack here and he had a whole bunch of these stacks. And I made this stupid mistake of coming up to his house. They lived about 3 hours away. And usually when I went up there, he would ask me for, computer help. And he asked me, I don't remember what he asked me for it at the time, but I'm like, okay, before I can work on your problem here, I need to like make sense of this chaos. And so I went to, whatever it is, view, sort by grid.
Yeah.
And once you do that, there is no undo.
Yeah.
I remember the look on his face. I realized that I could not undo that. We're talking about hours and hours and hours, and hours of organizing all of this stuff on this careful table that I just completely lucked out. And I don't remember now how I used this in talks, but it was something along the lines of, I think it was like the target user, right? We kind of approach problems thinking we're the target user, and that's how I function on my, on my Mac. And so I need to have him function that way. But that was a tough learning experience for me early in my career.
That's like makes for the most awkward dinner I can imagine. It's like, because you can't undo, the cool thing about him is he was taking the metaphor literally. I love that. Like, that's Neomorphism must have been his jam. He was like all about it. And then, order. I probably would have done the same thing. Get your labels on the right. Let's get your icons on the left and make them small. I would have done all that. That's cool. That's funny. The only thing from your talk is I watched one of the most recent ones on your site, and you talked about that fucking refrigerator with that stupid water thing. So my parents have that, and you mentioned that you do it the first time. You can forget, and if you've had like a drink or two, you can forget again, and it's so annoying to go, and then when you push a cup in and water just sprays everywhere, and you can't leave water on the ground, so now you got to go get a freaking towel. And I cannot stand that. I cannot believe somebody shipped that and did not user test that.
It's like literally, how did they not user test that thing? It would have been immediately obvious.
Somebody's ego got in the way, and they said no. Like there is a gangster version of this. I remember I was recalling this with a buddy of mine. I was like, remember when iPhone came out and if like you covered up the antenna wrong, it would like drop the call. And somebody had emailed Steve Jobs, because I guess his email is generally known, and just like railed into him about it. And his response was like, don't hold it like that, basically. I just thought that was such a funny, hilarious, like, I mean, obviously we're Apple response. I feel like somebody at that company must have been like, they're doing it wrong. Regular people understand, the label, they read the label before they act, and then we're stuck with it. Okay, well, let's try some questions. Let's see if Mary can get us some questions. I think she hears us. And Mary, you can text me. Do we have anybody we can talk to, or can I ask him some more questions of my own? It's worst case scenario, you and I'll just talk. That's why I call it Call Me Maybe, because maybe nobody's going to call, but then I still get to talk to you. While I wait for her, I have one about like one that was a little surprising for me to see on your site. I don't know why. I just, I'm so used to like seeing like design and everything on your site, but you just did like a 5-part series on mental health. What like inspired that? What made you think about doing that and like devote that? Like, cause you just brought your site back, it seems. And then that's like one of the first batches of content. Can you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I've just found that this is a topic that A, we don't talk about, and B, affects many more people than we realize. And I'd like to think that I really didn't have too many challenges as far as my mental health is concerned until we went to California. And then it became obvious that, in part because of the significant changes that I talked about earlier, and just the maybe the environment of being in Silicon Valley, started exposing some of the challenges that I had personally. And then it wasn't long after that, when others that I worked with, including team members, it became apparent that there were some challenges there as well. We have some challenges, on both sides of our family, my family and my wife's family. And, when you think of how many people this topic of mental health touches, it's absolutely enormous. And yet we don't talk about it. And so I kind of wanted to use, maybe if I have any status remaining at this point in my career, I wanted to use some of that to say, look, it's okay to talk about this kind of stuff. And I'm going to set the tone by doing a full-on series. And so I got my brother-in-law, who works professionally in this field, to make sure we had, the medical angle on this. I brought in Suzanne my wife, as a co-author, to make sure that we had kind of a non-tech, what's it like to deal with this in a family setting perspective. And then, of course, my professional perspective. And it came together really well. It did not get nearly as much maybe traction as I'd hoped. But I think that's a big result of the fact that nobody likes to talk about this, right? And it's not something that we kind of, rah, rah, rah on Twitter about. But nonetheless, I'm like, I don't care. I want to talk about this. If 3 people listen to me, I'm going to still talk about it.
Yeah, I think that's great. One of those things is, I think, I'm going to come back to the mental health thing in a second, but I also think things generally don't get traction. Anything effortful doesn't seem to get that much traction. There's like a middle space of effort. A tweet will get traction and a book will get traction, but like blog posts or like longer form writing don't seem to get it in the same way that they used to, which is really discouraging for like writing it. And I'll come back. I want to ask you in a bit, like how you've managed to keep a site going for 21 years, but to come back to the mental health thing first, this has been like an especially brutal year for that. And my company is pretty small, and I know the people on my team pretty well. And so I can, over 10 years of working at the same place with a lot of the same people, can track like, quantity of either like immediate for the person on the team or like extended family. And there's nothing like this year compared to, like, we've had like a major crisis with almost everybody at the company. It's been a super duper hard year. And so I think it's, if there was ever a time to like help instigate more conversation around it, it would be that, because it's like so universal and so surface level that like it's harder to hide. And like, you're right, it's like crazy important. So that's cool. I like the idea. Just fuck it, just write about whatever you want. Is that what sort of helped you make? Because I was thinking your website could buy alcohol now in the United States of America. So it's 1999, or so like, how do you even keep the motivation to keep a site like up for that long, especially when like it's easy to stop one, and then like people aren't going to sites in the same way that they once did.
Yeah, well, that's just it. I mean, even if you look at my site today, you'll find that the first post in kind of relaunching my site, I think it was early this year, was titled "Don't Call it a Comeback." I don't have too many posts beyond that before it went silent for a number of months. And I think that's just the reality of where I'm at in this, at this point in my life and in my career. I'd like to think I have enough time to write, but unfortunately I don't. Outside of work, it's hard to make time for it. Inside of work, it's definitely hard to make time for it. I don't have the luxury, maybe like running Authentic Jobs, where it was just me and a few other guys, and we were able to do our thing. So my schedule just doesn't allow for it. In fact, back in the day when I was writing prolifically, there were many nights where I had my laptop in bed late at night, kids had gone to bed, it's like 11, 12 o'clock at night. And here I am pecking away at an article. And that's how I wrote a lot of these articles was late at night or early in the morning when I had, just some time to myself. And like you're saying, that was the thing back then. And now it's not, right? It's more, it's books, and there's not a whole lot in between, to your point, with the exception of maybe the major media outlets that have, out of necessity, continued that. But for the rest of us to write an article, it's not just about writing the article. It's about, are you going to get any eyeballs on that article? And that's a totally different beast nowadays.
Yeah, and there's a lot of effort. Like, you almost have to consistently publish in order to have a chance at any. Like, it was so much nicer with RSS when, like, I could just pick people to follow, and then whenever they had a thought, then I would get it. That was really fun. And now it's sort of like, if I was gonna like have a thought, it's like, there's no reason to write it, because it's basically the same thing as just me, knowing it. What I mean? It's like there's no difference. So we had Natasha, we lost Natasha. Natasha, you come back, but Chris Shiflett is on. I'm gonna have him say hi. This is kind of fun. We'll see what sort of fun question he has. What's up, Chris? How you doing?
What's up, Chris?
Hey, Cameron, longtime fan.
Oh, this is
Which
great.
Cameron?
Both.
Nice.
Nice and efficient. Yeah, my question, actually, I just wanted to piggyback off the whole blogging thing because, yeah, like you, I've found it hard lately to find time to write. And I really miss that. I miss when all of us wrote and really kind of followed along. But there's another ambitious thing that you seem to still manage to pull off, even though it takes a while, which is those typographic posters. And those take years. And that's exactly the sort of project that, for a lot of us, myself included, it would fizzle out, because anything that's going to take years to work on while trying to like juggle, work and family responsibilities and generally feeling overwhelmed by all the things, what advice do you have for those who want to pursue like these big, ambitious projects that you have to chip away at because there's no time to actually just dig in and have, huge swaths of dedicated time to spend on it?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I'm not even sure what my answer would be, Chris, because that's such a key thing that you're drawing out. I think the thing that comes to mind for me is, what is driving you? What's motivating you? And if I were to ask myself that question, I think at this point is, for me, the posters are a recognition that at some point I will no longer be designing, and at some point I'm not going to be around, period. What's going to last beyond me? Certainly my children. That hopefully is where I'm pouring as much attention as possible. But beyond that, what's gonna stand, and professionally for me, what's gonna stick around. And so, the Golden Gate Bridge that I'm working on right now, I've been working on since I don't know how many months now. It's been a while, and I haven't even gotten to the bridge. I'm working on stupid rocks.
I saw some rocks though.
Oh my gosh.
It's great looking rocks.
Absolute pain in the rear. I did not expect that rocks would be this difficult to render, with type. But for me, the motivation is, I'm like, at some point, people might be trading these on eBay, right? It might be, one might end up in a gallery or something like that. And that for me, that's the driving factor at this point. What can live on beyond my career? And I have the luxury, given that there's no timeline with it, right? This is not a work-related thing. I can chip away at it, and so if it takes me a year, it takes me a year. Now, I did learn, as you know, Chris, with the Brooklyn Bridge, to not take 3 years to work on a poster, because the financial return, at least as far as that's concerned, is very, very difficult when you spend that much time on one poster. At the end of the day, I do need to sell these things and ship them, and so I have to be cognizant of the amount of time that I'm putting into them. And I've learned enough things at this point, in fact, to take some shortcuts in the process to be able to help bring that down. But even at the end of the day, I'm just chipping away at this. Okay, I'll get it out the door when I get it out the door, and hopefully some people like it.
So what are some examples of chipping away at it, though? I'm really curious where in your busy life you're like, all right, everybody, don't bother me for an hour. I'm going to go draw some pictures with letters. Yeah.
Draw some rocks. I'll find some time once in a while for a couple hours, at say 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
riff on some rocks for 2 hours and maybe 3 until my eyes can't take it anymore, and then I have to turn in at that point. But it's maybe once a week that I do that.
So you try to not rob from like weekends or other family time?
I've done that with
general?
most of the posters, but with this one, yeah, it's like I'll maybe take some time here and then a Saturday, but I'm trying to as much as I can at least do it outside of that kind of stuff. Now that being said, my sons, most of them are pretty self-sufficient at this point. My oldest is 20, and then I've got a 19-year-old, a 17-year-old, and a 15-year-old. The 2 oldest are not even at home anymore. One's in college and one is in Norway. And so the responsibilities of me being there and kind of engaged with them are not quite as great as they were when they were much younger. And I was much more involved in helping them, with homework and all that stuff. They're pretty self-sufficient.
It's interesting because you have 5 and Chris has got 3 and I've got 1. So you know everything about the journey, and yours are old, and Chris's are middle, and
Yeah.
mine is turning 1 on Sunday.
Oh, awesome.
So I was like, oh man, that sounds good. No, I'm not helping with homework. He's at college. Let's get that going. So you don't pick you go till your eyes get tired. You don't pick like a number of like, I'm going to try to get 2 rocks done tonight, or segment it into bite-sized chunks.
I try to, and then I realized those rocks take a lot more time than I was expecting. I think at this point I've had to accept that every project I do outside of work, like home repair projects, takes about 2 or 3 times as long as I thought it was going to take. I'm like, okay, I got 2 hours on a Saturday. I'm going to fix this door, and then 6 hours later, I'm finding the door.
Yeah, for me, it depends on how much I want to fix that door. So that it would be 2 hours of telling myself, just fix the dang door. And then 2 hours of maybe fixing the door. And then 2 hours of celebrating having fixed the door because I didn't want to do it. The thing about the posters though, or the prints is you hit on something that I think is very common for people who work on the internet for a really long time is you don't get the satisfaction out of digital that you do out of anything physical. And so you'll see everybody we have friends who they moved up and now they're making boats, and other people make tables, and some of the best product designers I know are basically solely interested in making tables, which you can get table, lots of things can be tables. And so I'm always oh no, our best digital product designers are making tables, but there's some lack of satisfaction that people are getting from even really good digital work that you can get from basically your whole career versus your nights and weekends. You might derive more satisfaction from the artwork in the end than you do from the design and the web stuff, which is I don't know what to think about that.
Totally. I think part of it, we could talk at length about this. So I'll keep my remarks short, but I think part of it too is just the, whatever we want to call it, the burnout that comes from, working in our industry, and the fact that, pushing 20 years, how much can you do this for another 20 years? You have to ask that question sometimes, or should you go off and make tables all day, or make tables in your spare time or something like that?
Yeah. The burnout thing I think about a lot because it's interesting. You would think that the best people wouldn't get burnout. I don't know if that makes sense, but I would think that the people with the most ability wouldn't get burnout because they're operating at the top of their game. Like an athlete, if Tom Brady could keep being quarterback of a football team, if his body would allow him to, obviously he would still want to do that, right? And it's same thing, I'm sure, LeBron James, the best people would keep playing if they could, but the best people on the internet, they don't. It doesn't happen the same way. And I was wondering, the thing I've been trying to get my head around is it could be that when you're that good, the potential for what you're doing in the web, but the current environment doesn't really give you that back. You're not getting back out what you want back in. He took a break because his dad got killed, right? That was why Michael took a break. His dad was shot on the side of the road, I think. I could be wrong about that, though. I didn't watch the new documentary yet. I want to. But yeah, I just think that there's people who are burnt out because they thought they were going to be able to create X, and then their whole career they've been basically just told to push around rectangles or something like that. Yeah, I don't know.
We haven't proven yet that people can go for 40 years in this industry, right? We're not yet as an industry to even prove that.
Yeah, But this is something that goes back like early Fictive Ken. I would say like what we want to be is world savvy, because anybody can kind of become web savvy. You can sort of get good at the application of the technique, but like knowing where to apply and why to apply and things like that is the only stuff you can get from like life experience, which is basically the only edge you have as a person getting older. Is if you can't acquire like wisdom and experiences, I do think you're in a lot of trouble, like career wise. Like if you're just acquiring technique, I think that's like a really dangerous place to be, because stamina just doesn't hold up, right? And then like priorities to hold up with the kids and everything. I don't know. Chris, you got another question? I have one more. It's on my list. Okay.
Not a good one. You asked.
Not yours. A good one. Okay. Well, what I was thinking about is like, so you've been an entrepreneur, and that is like a whole like lifestyle. I mean, a lot comes with that, good and bad. And then you've been at like a big company like Facebook and a growing company like Pendo. Like, are you somebody who's like, I did the entrepreneurship thing and I'm done? Or is it like, there's a part of you that's unlocked that's like, if the right idea comes along, I'm going to do this again, because there's so many of the like personal freedom benefits outweigh the like stress of like having to have it all on your own kind of a thing.
Yeah, I mean, all three of us here talking to each other right now, I think we all have, the entrepreneurial spirit in our DNA. I mean, that sounds really lofty, but it really is true, right? It's part of who we are and how we operate. And I don't know what the rest of my career might look like. But, I don't think I have to be running my own business to strictly be an entrepreneur, right? How much freedom and creativity do I have within my role right now, for example, or any future roles where I can have that drive and that motivation and that flexibility to be able to do and accomplish the things that I hope to accomplish. One of the things I think I irrespective of whatever that might look like for me in the future, there's just something rewarding at this point in my career around managing people. And that's probably not even the right terminology, right? Yes, I'm a manager. Yes, I'm a VP, but it's like, how do you set people up for success? And all three of us have been able to do that in a setting where we run our own businesses or co-founded businesses, and it's just incredibly rewarding. Of course, with that comes everything else, payroll and everything else you have to be concerned about and letting people go and whatnot. But I think for me, I just love working with people and supporting them, and so whatever that is going to look like over the next 20 years or whatever that period ends up being, I hope that keeps me challenged. And thankfully, I do have things like the posters on the side to be able to the way I like to say it is, that's the thing where nobody else can tell me what to do, and I don't have to tell anyone else what to do. I just get to go be me and lock myself into Illustrator and see what that leads to.
That's cool. I'm going to make another football thing. I'm not like a big football fan. But there's a book that I read that I think is a good business book called The Score Will Take Care of Itself. Probably like the best business book, I think. But it's all about this football coach named Bill Walsh, who I had to learn about. And he did 49ers, like Joe Montana, Steve Young era. And he just did a bunch of cool things and said a bunch of cool stuff. But one of the things that they said about him afterwards was the number of head coaches that had worked for him. It's like, it's not just about like his performance, but the number of people who had worked for him who now are head coaches and successful head coaches. And I always thought like that was really cool. And there's the woman who did that famous Netflix culture PowerPoint. Have you ever seen that online? It's really good and really hardcore. It's like one of the slides says like average performance deserves excellent severance or something like that. Like she's cold, but it's still really good and really a really interesting like take. And then she said she wanted Netflix to be like a great place to be from. And I like when people are thinking about like that growth trajectory of people up front. Like that's really cool. And the entrepreneurial spirit thing, it does sound lofty and a lot of words around that, but I do sometimes think of it as like an entrepreneurial like disease, where it's like, if any of us if we, instead of doing our own thing, had just gone to any company that you bought the stuff from, like Netflix, Amazon, Facebook, like if you had just gone to any of those places at the time that you started your company, you'd probably be doing a lot better than you are now. And you probably have like way lower stress or whatever, I don't know. So yeah, but what can you do? You end up being that you are who you are. So not much you can do to fight it. So we're coming up on an hour. I just want to ask, like, to wrap here, Cameron. I'm about to have a 1-year-old. You have 5, and you seem like a very happy dad, and so I thought I might ask you some advice of what I could expect, or what you might, if you give people some typical advice about having children and things like that. I made it past the baby, keep them alive. Well, keep them alive part is an ongoing thing. So I made it to 1. That's what we'll say. I'll give myself credit for that. Mostly my wife too.
Yeah, that's a big milestone.
Yeah.
That's all, Cameron.
Thank you. Okay, cool. Yeah, I can take a hat off.
I'd love to wax eloquently here about 20 years of raising kids, but the reality is you just can't give up. That's my 2 cents. Just keep at it. There are nights, I'm sure there have been nights already, where you go to bed thinking, did I do anything that mattered for my child today? Right? Like, did that matter? And the thing is that only compounds as they get older, right? And with your children dealing with much weightier matters than in their teenage years, and you just have to realize the best you can do. So screw that thing by Yoda around. There is no try, only do.
Yeah.
Parenting, it's like that's all you can do sometimes is try, because it feels like everything you tried did nothing as far as influencing outcomes, and you just have to hold on to that hope that you're actually doing something right. And I can tell you now, 20 years into it, when I look at our sons, I think, gosh, somehow they grew up to be great young men despite being just a terrible father.
That's cool.
Maybe one more thing I'll say here is the way I like to approach, or not approach this, but tell this to other people, is you got to think about parenting as batting average, not home runs, because you're going to have a lot of strikeouts. You're going to have a few home runs, but if your batting average as a parent is kind of consistently trending upward, you're trying to do the right things. That's really all that matters, right? That you go to bed and it feels like today you were just a complete failure as a father, but you get up tomorrow and you try again, and maybe you go to bed feeling not quite as much of a failure. You're going to find over the course of 20 years that, oh yeah, you know what, you stepped up to plate. You had a 280 batting average, which is typically pretty good. And guess what? Your kids turned out all right.
I like that idea of like being prepared. Like I'm just even going to mentally prepare myself for like feeling like a failure as a parent, as it is so hard to feel like a success at like a spouse, as a parent, as a person running a company, as a person with friends, like just covering like, and then there's like the family around, like parents and sisters and brothers and stuff like that. So like, it's an interesting notion to sort of give yourself a little bit of compassion on that front. I did hear from somebody else who said, there's nothing to change in them. If you want any change in them, you have to change yourself, which is like, oh my God, one more thing to do. But that sounded pretty on point. I know the things that I do that are like my mom and that I do that are like my dad. Is there anything that you noticed like migrated from you to like the majority of your kids? Like
that's got to be the worst part of parenting, especially maybe Chris can add some insight here too, is when you see your kids do things that came from your DNA and you're frustrated by it, and you're like, why are you doing that? You can't do it because it came from you. That's terrible.
Yeah. Are you seeing that too, Chris, already?
Yeah, a little bit. And yeah, exactly what Cameron said. It can be off-putting, and it makes you feel like you're being hypocritical if you try to correct any behavior that is clearly your fault. It's like, well, I guess I just have to let that one go, right?
Yeah. I probably would go for it until they told me, well, you do that. And I'd be like, nah, you got me.
Yeah, the worst part is too that some of my family members will tell my sons about some of the things I do.
Oh yeah, that's
brutal. Yeah, that's not. You can't have narking. That's no good. Oh man. Okay. Well, I like that.
On the flip side, though, you do get to see things come out in your kids that are on the positive side, right? And not just you, but from the other parent. And you're like, you know what? That's pretty special and magical to see that happen. Now, I'm speaking from the perspective of having natural kids, right? And so adopting is a different world that I'm not familiar with, but at least for those that are natural birth children, you're able to see both the strengths and maybe some of the challenges that come from that.
Yeah. I have cousin and I have other people who have in my life who have like adopted kids. Somebody works at our company too. And you do still see it. So there's like that fun nature nurture thing where you're like, oh, okay, you're picking up that from that one, that from that one. So that still does come through, which is pretty cool. I had another parent thing that I was gonna ask you before I ended. So I was gonna think about it. Damn it. I'll just be a bad parent, not knowing the answer to it. It is fun though. I do really like it. I wish I had started sooner. You seem like you started sooner. Pretty clever. And then, but it's a real treat, much more so than I had expected. What was I gonna say? Something about him. Oh well. Dude, thank you for doing this. I know it's so weird and it's like a very brave of you to join just some live thing where I've never you've never done it before. We probably could have talked about like your audio product too, now that I'm thinking about it, because you do have any like thing with audio, but maybe we'll just do another conversation another time and we'll catch up again.
What, for me, it was easy to show up, right? I just like joined the Zoom and off we go. You've been doing a gazillion things behind the scenes and the team that's helping you. So I appreciate you setting this up. I hope to see it take off. I do think this is an underserved part of our industry that radio is already dialed in.
Yeah.
Figure this out. There might be some good potential here.
Yeah, and I'm just going to treat this, when you were describing how you work on your prints, is exactly the way I want to feel about this, which is like, I was even like, should I cancel on camera? And I'm like, I'm not ready. I could do more and I could reach more. And I was like, dude, if you just start doing that, then you'll never do it. And it's no fun. And then it's too serious. And so like, I'm going to have like, even if nobody, like, it's nice. Chris called in. That was cool. But if nobody ever calls in on any of these, but I get to have like a 1 hour catch up, like, cause I'm talking to Deepa next, and I love Deepa and I haven't talked to her in forever too. And like, if I get to catch up with my friends, like in the way that I normally would, and that's like a nice excuse for it, that I'm going to consider it a win every single time. And then we can kind of go from there. But I had seen, yeah.
I was just going to say, this has been a massive win for me. So you got a big fan here.
Nice. Thanks, buddy. All right. Well, I'll catch you later. You have a good night. I'm still afternoon for me. I got a couple hours of work to do, so I'm going to get back to it. I'll catch you later.